Okay, let's unpack this. Think back with me to 2014. I'm practically buried under like this pile of external hard drives.
Right.
Each one crammed with satellite images of the Borneo rainforest. And we had the pictures, stark evidence of deforestation. But trying to actually process that data,
Mm.
it was a nightmare.
Mm.
Every time I tried to run even a simple script just to line up the images, it would crash hours later.
Oh, yeah, I remember those days.
And all the while, the illegal logging just kept going. That feeling, just being completely swamped by environmental information, that's when it really clicked for me.
Yeah.
AI for sustainability wasn't just like a cool concept. It felt absolutely necessary.
And what's fascinating, I think, is how that feeling of being overwhelmed has only, well, intensified.
Totally.
Now, here we are in 2025, and we're facing just a flood of environmental data. I mean, think about the new climate disclosure rules, US, EU.
Yeah, huge pressure on companies now.
Exactly. Publicly traded firms need detailed, verifiable figures, and city planners trying to get grants for infrastructure, they need hard numbers, too, to prove the impact.
Right.
The sheer volume, sensors, CO2 inventories, climate model. Analysts are swimming in terabytes of this stuff.
It's like we're trying to bail out this sinking ship with a teacup.
Yeah.
And AI for sustainability feels like maybe our best life raft,
Yeah.
but it's doing something more fundamental too, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's sort of reframing
Yeah.
these really complex environmental challenges.
That's a great way to put it. It's reframing them as problems that machine learning can actually get its teeth into.
So instead of just, I don't know, making educated guesses about how hot Paris might be in August 2040,
Right.
we're treating it as a task, taking these huge multi-layered climate data sets and scaling them down, making them more detailed, more local, kilometer-level view, maybe?
Exactly. That scaling down, or downscaling as it's called, is key. And connecting this to the bigger picture, the shift from what could feel like guesswork to actual learning objectives, that's really defining this decade, I think. The whole conversation around how we use AI for sustainability, it's only going to get bigger, more crucial.
And of course, the immediate question, the elephant in the room. I know you listening are probably thinking this. What about the energy use?
Ah, yes.
These AI models can be serious power hogs. Aren't we just, swapping one carbon problem for another?
It's a really important point, a key tension, definitely, and it's something we absolutely need to get into later.
Okay.
But for now, the main goal of this deep dive is to really map out the territory. What is AI for sustainability?
Good place to start. So let's untangle that term, because you hear AI for sustainability everywhere now. It's become a bit of a...
A marketing buzzword.
Yeah.
It can be.
Right. So in practical terms, what really counts? What qualifies?
Okay, at its core, I see it as any computational learning system.
Yep.
So a system that learns from data that's primarily designed to either directly reduce environmental harm or to significantly speed up our understanding of how the planet works, planetary dynamics.
I like that broad definition, especially because, as you said, all these environmental issues are so interconnected.
Precisely. It's not just one isolated problem. It's all linked.
Okay, so let's get specific then. What are some concrete examples? How does this look in action?
Think about it as a loop. You sense something in the environment, you analyze that data using AI, and then you use those insights to take action. That's the sensing to actuation loop.
Sensing to actuation.
Got it.
And we're seeing this play out in loads of ways. Energy optimization, for instance, using reinforcement learning.
Okay. What's reinforcement learning again? Like training a pet?
Kind of, yeah. Think of it like training a system with digital treats, rewards, to get it to perform a task efficiently. So algorithms are using this to fine-tune heating and cooling in big data centers, which use a ton of energy.
Makes sense.
And predictive models are forecasting solar energy output, which helps grid operators figure out the best time to use battery storage.
So it's about making our current systems smarter, more efficient. What else?
Well, climate downscaling, which we touched on,
Yeah.
these sophisticated AI programs, deep networks, are taking those broad climate model predictions, the 25-kilometer view.
Right, the fuzzy picture. Exactly. And translating them into street-level risk maps. So you could potentially see the specific flood probability for a particular neighborhood in, say, Jakarta.
Wow, that's powerful.
Then there's sustainable logistics, route planning algorithms that don't just find the fastest route, but the one that minimizes CO2.
Okay.
Even self-driving forklifts in warehouses, optimizing their paths to save energy.
Very tangible. And this isn't just for cities and buildings, right? It applies to ecosystems too.
Absolutely. Ecological monitoring is a huge area. Computer vision models scanning detailed satellite images, hyperspectral data
Yeah.
to spot illegal gold mines.
hidden in the rainforest.
Yeah. Or acoustic models listening for the sound of chainsaws in protected reserves in Bolivia.
Listening for chainsaws.
Right.
Incredible.
And looking further out, materials discovery using generative models, the same kind of AI behind things like ChatGPT, to design safer, biodegradable battery electrolytes, for example.
So designing new materials from scratch using AI.
Essentially, yes. Aiming for stuff that works well but doesn't harm the environment.
So the core idea here is taking this absolute flood of data, distilling it down into actionable insights, and doing it fast enough to make a difference.
Exactly. Quick iteration is key.
And you mentioned that end-to-end loop, sensing to actuation, is really critical for something to qualify. Why is that distinction so important?
Because, well, pretty dashboards are nice, right? But they don't, by themselves, reduce emissions.
Right.
For something to truly be AI for sustainability, it needs to close that loop. The AI's insight has to actually drive a change, inform a decision, trigger an action that leads to a real, measurable, sustainable outcome. Otherwise, it's just analysis. Important, maybe, but not the full picture.
Got it. Okay, let's dive into a specific example then. Loop. They're fascinating, aren't they? Massive energy footprint from the data centers,
Huge.
but also pioneers in some of this AI for sustainability work. You mentioned 3 projects. Let's start with Project Greenlight.
Right, Greenlight is a great example because it's effective but maybe not flashy. Think about timing your bike ride to hit all the green lights.
Yeah, I tried that. Doesn't always work.
Huh. Well, Project Greenlight is essentially doing that, but automatically for whole cities. They use reinforcement learning again.
The reward training.
Exactly. Analyzing tons of anonymized location data from Google Maps users. Then they suggest new timing patterns for existing traffic signals. No new hardware needed.
Just changing the timing based on real traffic flow.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And the results? Pilot programs have shown up to 30% fewer stop-and-go events.
30%, that's huge for congestion.
It is. And roughly a 10% drop in tailpipe CO2 emissions from cars idling or accelerating.
Wow.
It's this kind of, maybe boring incremental AI application that actually scales incredibly well. One traffic light at a time adds up across a city. Think about the air quality improvement, too.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, then there's FireSat. That sounds much more, well, high-tech.
FireSat tackles wildfires, which, as the sources we looked at mentioned, are like climate change on fast forward.
A terrifying reality.
Their satellites scan the whole planet every 20 minutes. And crucially, they have AI on board the satellite.
On the satellite itself, not back on Earth.
Right. That AI compares the fresh data to historical baseline data, looking for anomalies. Specifically, heat blooms as small as 5 by 5 meters.
Tiny.
Incredibly small. The goal is super early detection. Spotting a fire when it's just starting gives firefighters crucial time hours, maybe even days to contain it before it explodes.
That could save lives, property, ecosystem.
Absolutely, and that's why projects like FireSat often put Google high up in rankings for AI for sustainability. It's deeply integrated, high-impact stuff.
Okay, and the third one was eco-routing. That's the one many of us might actually use every day.
Exactly, that little green leaf icon you sometimes see in Google Maps.
Yeah. I always wondered what dictated that.
That's eco-routing. It's an AI model usually running right there on your phone, suggesting routes predicted to use the least amount of fuel.
Not necessarily the fastest.
Not always. It considers things like hills, traffic, steady speeds. Since they launched it in 2021, the estimate is savings of around 2.4 million metric tons of CO2.
2.4 million tons. That's hard to grasp.
It's roughly equivalent to taking 500,000 gasoline cars off the road for a whole year.
Just from suggesting slightly different routes.
Yep. It's AI for sustainability woven into everyday life, making the greener choice the easy choice.
So if you look at Google's playbook here, what's the pattern?
Well, they leverage their massive proprietary data sets, traffic, satellite imagery, terrain. They apply clever AI models, and then they integrate the results into popular services people already use, like Maps. That seems to be their template.
Makes sense. Okay, let's shift gears now to the scientific frontier. You mentioned Orbit 2 as this really ambitious deep learning effort. Tell us about that.
Yeah, Orbit 2, the paper just came out earlier this year, 2025. It's really pushing the envelope. We're talking huge scale here. 10 billion parameters in the model. Yep. Trained on 4.2 billion spatiotemporal data points. It required exaflop scale computing power to train. Just immense.
Wow. Why build something that massive? What's the motivation?
Well, it's that resolution gap we talked about. Traditional climate models often work at a 25-kilometer grid scale. Good for global trends, but
Not very useful if you're a city planner worried about flooding on a specific street corner.
exactly. Planners need detail down to maybe 100 meters, something they can work with on a laptop. Orbit 2 is designed specifically to bridge that gap. It's a downscaling powerhouse.
So what can it actually do?
Well, imagine feeding it global data temperature, humidity, and asking it for a specific region, like the Rhine Valley in Germany.
Okay.
Within minutes, Orbit 2 can generate these incredibly high-fidelity rainfall predictions for that specific area.
Minutes, not days or weeks.
Minutes. It's a huge leap in connecting the raw physics of climate models to the real world, very localized decisions that people need to make.
Right.
The example they gave was, say, a Dutch engineer getting near real-time flood risk updates from Orbit 2, allowing them to make adjustments to flood defenses almost immediately.
That's AI providing incredibly timely, actionable intel.
Precisely. Closing that gap between large-scale simulation and on-the-ground action.
But training a 10 billion parameter model,
Mhm.
that must take an astronomical amount of energy, right? Back to the energy question.
Absolutely. It's a critical point, and you have to address it. Training Orbit 2 did consume a significant amount of energy.
So how do they justify that?
Well, the research team reported that about 98% of the computing happened in data centers in Nordic countries, powered almost entirely by carbon-free energy sources.
Okay, 98% carbon-free power. That changes the calculation significantly.
It really does. If that's accurate, the net carbon impact looks much better. It underscores that essential calculation for any AI for sustainability project. You must weigh the energy cost against the potential environmental benefit. Is the outcome going to be a net positive?
Right. That seems to be the core question. Okay, let's zoom out again. Look at the bigger picture. Who else is doing significant work in this space? What are other key companies and their main initiatives?
Yeah, there are several major players making important contributions. Microsoft is a big one. Their Azure Digital Twins platform.
Digital twins, like a virtual copy.
Exactly. Creating digital replicas of things like buildings, factories, even whole supply chains or ecosystems. This lets engineers and scientists test efficiency tweaks or simulate changes in a virtual environment first.
Before trying it in the real world.
Yeah.
Saves resources, reduces risk.
Precisely. And they also have the planetary computer, which provides access to massive amounts of geospatial data and the tools to analyze it.
Yeah, okay. What about DeepMind? They're part of Google now, but known for AI breakthroughs.
Right. Their early work using reinforcement learning to control cooling systems in Google's data centers is almost legendary now.
That was the one with the huge energy savings, right?
Yeah, they reported something like a 40% reduction in cooling energy. It was a really influential early example showing the power of AI for operational efficiency.
Huge. Who else? Amazon.
Amazon, through AWS, is focusing heavily on supply chain optimization using AI forecasting. Predicting demand more accurately means less waste, less idle transport.
Which has a big carbon footprint.
Definitely. IBM is also in the mix. They developed something called TerraTorch.
TerraTorch
It's a geospatial toolkit. Importantly, they open sourced it.
made it free for anyone to use.
Yep. Which helps smaller research labs or organizations fine-tune vision models using NASA satellite imagery, for example.
Yeah.
It helps democratize access to these powerful tools.
That's important.
And one more interesting collaboration, American Airlines working with Google. They're using AI to help pilots avoid creating contrails.
Those white lines planes leave in the sky. I thought they were just water vapor.
They are, mostly, but they can trap heat in the atmosphere, contributing to warming. It's called radiative forcing. This AI system suggests slight altitude changes to avoid conditions where contrails form.
Does that use much extra fuel?
Apparently, the early results show significant contrail reduction with only minimal extra fuel burn. So potentially a big win for aviation's climate impact.
It really sounds like there's no single best platform then. It depends completely on what you're trying to do.
Exactly right. If your world revolves around satellite data, Google Earth Engine is probably your go-to. If you're a large company grappling with compliance and enterprise-wide sustainability reporting, Microsoft's Cloud for Sustainability might be the best fit.
And IBM for open source tools to get started.
Yeah, IBM Stack offers a good entry point, especially with TerraTorch for geospatial work. The fact that we have this diverse market is actually healthy. No single company can possibly tackle every facet of the climate challenge. We need all these different approaches.
Okay, here's an interesting twist we touched on. Generative AI. These large language models, they've faced scrutiny over their own energy use.
Definitely.
And now they're being used to streamline sustainability reporting. There's a certain delicious irony there, isn't there?
There really is. It's quite something. The very models that raised some eyebrows about energy consumption are now saving companies significant time and, yes, probably energy too in the reporting process.
So how did that actually work? What's the pipeline?
Typically, you'd see a few layers. First, an extraction layer. AI agents go into the company's systems, ERPs, invoices, IoT sensor feeds.
Pulling out all the relevant data points.
Right, and automatically tidying them with the correct scope codes for emissions reporting, scope 1, 2, 3, etc.
That alone must save a ton of manual work.
Oh, absolutely. Then you might have a verification layer. This cross-checks the internal data against external sources, maybe satellite data for land use or supplier certifications. It's like automated due diligence.
Building confidence in the numbers.
Exactly. Then comes the narration layer. A large language model takes all that verified data and drafts the actual report in plain English.
Like writing the text.
Yeah, aligning it with standard frameworks like CSRD or GRI, which are the big ones companies report against. It can even generate the charts and graphs to go with it.
Wow.
And finally, often there's a scenario engine. This lets managers ask what-if questions. What if we electrify 30% of our fleet? What's the impact on capital expenditure, on our emissions goals, on the payback period? The AI simulates it.
So those quarterly climate audits that used to take, what, weeks?
Months. Can potentially be done much, much faster. We're already hearing from sustainability consultants that these tools are starting to shift their jobs.
How so?
Less time spent on the groundwork of carbon accounting, more time on higher value strategic advice, which is where you want smart people focused anyway on actually reducing emissions, not just counting them.
Makes perfect sense. Okay, let's pivot from corporations to cities. Cities are obviously huge centers of energy use and emissions.
Yeah.
The potential for AI for sustainability there must be enormous.
It truly is. Cities are where the majority of energy is consumed, even though they cover a small land area. And digital twin platforms are becoming really key here.
We mentioned those with Microsoft Azure. So building a virtual city.
Pretty much. Integrating detailed 3D scans like LiDAR with real-time data from traffic sensors, power grid schematics, creating a live simulation.
What can you do with that?
Vienna's Mobility Lab had a great example. They used their digital twin to test the impact of creating car-free zones before they actually implemented them.
Smart. What did they find?
The simulation predicted positive outcomes, and when they went ahead with it, they saw increased pedestrian traffic, stable revenues for retailers in the area, and crucially, lower nitrogen oxide levels.
Yeah.
Real winged validation.
That's a powerful case for using these simulations for planning. What other urban AI apps are emerging?
Well, we're seeing machine learning used to create detailed heat maps. These help planners figure out the absolute best spots to plant trees to maximize urban cooling.
Strategic tree planting.
Exactly. And generative AI models are being used to design streets, iterating on designs to improve accessibility, manage stormwater better, make them more resilient to climate impacts.
And what about cities that aren't, Vienna or Silicon Valley? Can smaller cities access this tech?
That's where open source projects are vital. Something called Destin, that's a big European initiative, is developing an urban digital twin platform intended to be more widely accessible.
So local councils could potentially use these tools.
Yeah, if they invest in a couple of engineers who can learn to leverage these open source platforms, they could gain huge benefits in planning and sustainability without needing massive budgets.
Okay, let's circle back. We have to confront that core question again.
Yeah.
The carbon ledger. The footprint of AI itself. GPUs don't run on fairy dust, right?
Right. They run on electricity. And generating that electricity often involves carbon emissions.
So the central question, is using AI for sustainability ultimately self-defeating? Are the emissions from the AI canceling out the environmental benefits?
It's the question. And the answer really depends on that ratio. The amount of environmental harm avoided versus the emissions incurred by the AI.
So how do we tip that balance favorably? What are the strategies to minimize AI's footprint?
There are basically four main levers we can pull. First is what you might call a model diet.
Slimming down the AI.
Exactly. Techniques like pruning, cutting out unnecessary connections in the neural network, quantization using less precise numbers, which takes less energy, and distillation training a smaller, leaner model to mimic a big one. Often, a smaller model works just fine for a specific task.
Okay, model diet. What's next?
Second is carbon-aware scheduling. This means timing the really intensive AI training jobs to run when the electricity grid has lots of renewable energy available, when the sun is shining, the wind is blowing.
So running the computations when the grid is greenest.
Yeah, precisely. Google and Microsoft are already doing this quite actively. Third is hardware efficiency. just building more energy-efficient chips and systems.
Hmm.
Things like high-bandwidth memory stacked right on the processor package, advanced liquid cooling.
Getting more computation per watt.
Yep. And looking further out, things like neuromorphic chips, inspired by the brain, hold promise for even greater efficiency, though that's still early days.
Okay. Diet, scheduling, hardware was a fourth.
The fourth is offset integrity. If a company claims its AI operations are carbon neutral because they bought offsets, those offsets need to be rock solid.
Meaning?
Meaning transparent, verifiable, additional things like funding new renewable energy projects through power purchase agreements or investing in credible direct air capture, not just, dubious tree planting schemes. Without offset integrity, there's a huge risk of backlash.
Got it. So when these four tactics model slimming, smart scheduling, efficient hardware, and honest offsetting are genuinely implemented.
Then the net footprint of AI for sustainability can be, and I think generally is, strongly positive. Even with something energy intensive upfront like Orbit 2, the potential long-term benefit for climate adaptation or mitigation can vastly outweigh that initial energy cost.
That makes sense. It's about being conscious and deliberate about the whole life cycle.
Yeah.
Okay, let's peek over the horizon. What's next? What major trends do you see shaping AI for sustainability in, say, the next 5 years?
I think we're moving from the proof of concept phase to the making it ubiquitous phase. I see three big trends emerging. First, the rise of domain-specialized agents.
Meaning AI focused on very specific areas.
Exactly. Imagine a coral reef GPT, an AI trained specifically on everything known about coral biology, ocean chemistry, underwater acoustics.
Okay.
It could listen to hydrophone data from a reef, cross-reference it with water temperature sensors and satellite data, and provide real-time alerts to conservationists about bleaching events or disease outbreaks. That kind of focused generative AI for specific ecological niches has huge potential.
Yeah.
And it's kind of charming, right? Coral Reef GPT.
Huh? Yeah. Yeah, I like that. Okay, specialized agents. What else?
Second, I expect to see live dynamic carbon markets take shape. Think offsets verified by satellite data, traded almost in real time on transparent blockchain ledgers.
Cutting out the middlemen and the doubt.
Hopefully, with AI playing a key role in monitoring the projects, verifying the carbon removal or reduction, and ensuring the integrity of the whole market. Reducing greenwashing is a major goal there.
Okay, specialized agents, live carbon markets. Third trend.
Ambient sustainability. This is the idea that AI for sustainability becomes so integrated into our surroundings that we barely notice it.
Invisible AI.
Kind of like your smart home appliances automatically shifting their energy use to times when renewable power is cheapest and most abundant on the grid without you having to do anything. The heating adjusts slightly based on occupancy sensors and the weather forecast. It's just working efficiently in the background. That's the ideal, really.
Making sustainability the default, seamless path.
Exactly. The most effective AI for sustainability might be the kind you don't even know is there.
That's a really compelling vision. And achieving all this, of course, requires people, skilled people.
Absolutely critical. We're already seeing universities launch new degree programs focused specifically on AI and sustainability. The demand for talent that bridges these fields, people who understand both machine learning and environmental science, or data science and policy, is just exploding.
So good news if you have those interdisciplinary skills.
Very good news. If you have skills in AI, data analysis, ecology, climate modeling, urban planning, and you can combine them, your career prospects look incredibly bright in this space.
Okay, let's try and bring this all together. I started off talking about that frustrating experience back in 2014, drowning in data from Borneo. It really is remarkable to think how far we've come in, 11 years? AI for sustainability isn't just an idea anymore. It's indispensable. We see it in traffic lights, wildfire prediction, city planning, even ESG reporting now.
The progress has been incredibly rapid, but it's important to temper the enthusiasm with realism too, right? AI isn't a magic wand. It's not going to solve climate change on its own.
Right. Technology is a tool. Human action, policy, behavioral change, those are still essential.
Absolutely. AI gives us powerful new capabilities to understand the problem and find better solutions, but we still have to implement them.
And that vaccine analogy you mentioned earlier regarding the energy use, I think that's really helpful.
Yeah, the idea that just like the small carbon footprint of making vaccines is dwarfed by the immense benefit of preventing disease.
Right.
The energy used by well-designed AI for sustainability applications should be far outweighed by the climate damage it helps us avoid or mitigate.
Puts the cost in perspective.
Exactly. So the way forward, we need to wield these AI tools with both, I think, humility and ambition.
Humility and ambition, how so?
Humility in constantly auditing the footprint, being transparent about the energy use and the limitations. Ambition in pushing for democratization, getting these tools into more hands, and really targeting the most critical planetary challenges where AI can make the biggest difference.
So keep the ledger balanced, spread the tools, and aim high.
That's the goal.
And maybe, here's a final thought to leave our listeners with, maybe the ultimate success story for AI, for sustainability, will be when we stop talking about it as a separate thing.
Hmm.
When it's just so deeply woven into how we manage energy, design cities, monitor ecosystems, that it just becomes infrastructure,
Yeah.
the smart, sustainable way we do things. And we'll look back and just wonder, how did we ever manage without it?